in mind, this Roosevelt Hotel that's so notorious, it is a base of operations for Tren de Aragua, which is a vicious
I used to go to New York City. I wouldn't be going there anymore.
gang. It is unacceptable that we have these sanctuary city policies. I know Secretary...
So this building behind me, the Roosevelt Hotel, it's a New York City shelter, but it's also the base of operations for one of the most dangerous gangs in the entire world. And while the Trump administration does everything it can to get the defiant criminals living in places like this out of our country, New York City is circling its wagons, working overtime to protect federal fugitives. But in doing so, it's putting our entire country in grave danger.
Do you believe in the First Amendment? Do you believe in the First Amendment, Tom Homan?
New York City is currently housing more than 40,000 migrants, but the city has spent nearly $7 billion housing and feeding those who have arrived in the city over the last almost 3 years.
Some of the gang members get there, and they'll take the other teenagers who are also there, and they'll convert them. Say, listen, you're not doing anything, you can't work. So they become...
Hey, join our gang.
Right here in New York City, in America.
We are not going to allow New York State to be complicit.
Hey, kid, you want to join our gang?
Dragnet, because they don't like people who don't look like them, who don't speak the language like them, or who they believe are the root cause of all the problems and ills in this world.
Releasing a public safety threat back in the public is just stupid.
Now, Republicans right now are pushing for 2 bills. One would repeal the state's green light law, which allows undocumented immigrants to get driver's licenses, and the other bill, which is called
That's crazy.
Lincoln's Law, which would allow for law enforcement officers to notify ICE when they arrest an undocumented immigrant. Now, both bills have almost no shot at passing the Democrat-controlled Senate and Assembly.
So an intense crackdown on illegal immigration is headed to America's largest sanctuary city, New York. But what none of the radicals here defying ICE will
And the crazy part is I'm only 30 minutes from New York City.
by standing against America's immigration laws, they're not making things any safer for immigrant communities. In fact, the exact opposite of that is happening. Because the only immigrant community benefiting from laws that keep police at bay and help federal fugitives are the 60,000 illegal New York City residents who've been charged with a crime. And our sanctuary city policies just make all of our law-abiding communities worse off, as these compassionate laws just empower criminals who've come here to prey upon the rest of us. And these gang members, they get to do that from city-run asylum shelters like this, and our elected criminal sympathizing leaders, they do everything they can to keep things that way. With one of New York City's top mayoral hopefuls screaming at the border czar and proudly posting the footage of that incident to his campaign page, which will surely help donations roll in from anti-Trump progressives who don't understand the massive problems they're causing by backing a system that harbors dangerous fugitives who know their time is running out. Which brings us to the real reason a massive immigration battle is unfolding right here, and why it's so important that America get these gang members and criminals out of our country for good. By the way, if New York City wins this, law-abiding Americans everywhere, including here, will lose. Because the only reason leaders in our city are defending criminals hiding from the federal government in publicly funded shelters is because they support the ultimate goal of keeping America's border wide open, using sanctuary cities as a magnet for illegal immigration. Because as long as cities like New York are allowed to harbor an estimated 400,000 illegal residents, the gangs and cartels profiting from the exploitation of those residents and the illegal underground economy they create will keep bringing the wrong people here. And as you're about to see, defiant, radical voices here want that to happen, even if it means the very immigrant communities these protesters say they support are going to be worse off because of it. So this here hotel, it's full of gang members. The world knows it. The parents of the children who live in this place don't want gang members near their kids, and some of our city leaders want to keep things this way.
Hey kids, you want to join a gang?
Been used as a base of operations for these criminals to destroy our city from within.
The feds are opening up a criminal investigation into New York City's migrant hotels. We got a lot, even demanding staff turn in names of illegals that they were housing.
And keep in mind, this Roosevelt Hotel that's so notorious, it is a base of operations for Tren de Aragua, which is a vicious vicious gang. It's also...
So I don't think people understand what a big deal this is. This hotel, it's not just a hotel where some asylum seekers stay. No, it's the welcome center for every single new arrival in New York City. If the city's seen 200,000
New York's not that
people
bad.
flow
You,
through a shelter
like
system,
anywhere else,
they've
you go
all come
certain
through this
areas.
place.
It's
And having
it's
gang
okay.
members here is a massive problem because many of the folks who enter our country illegally, they do so with the help of gang members and cartels who get them across the southern border for fees which now are apparently over $10,000, and people, they can't afford that. But
Wait, you're telling me I can make 10 grand a pop bringing people over the border?
come across the border, they're given the cartel's wiring information, and they're expected to send that money back. And when you've got gang members in a place like this, it means that these people who were exploited before they enter our country are then exploited again once they're here by criminals who are traffickers and just want to make the most money that they possibly can, using the people around them as human capital for their criminal endeavors. And even though the NYPD's own statistics prove this is happening as a sanctuary city, nobody here is allowed to do anything about it.
Some of the gang members get there, and they'll take the other teenagers who are also there, and they'll convert them. Say, listen, you're not doing anything, you can't work.
Join our gang.
We're still waiting to go to school, so they become TDA right here in New York City in America. And you talk about this: 75% of the Midtown Manhattan arrests are illegal immigrants. That, according to the...
So 75% of the arrests in the area of town where this building is located are directly tied to our city's...
Well, not that they're directly involved, but they're the ones just the cartels and whatnot are the ones helping them get across the border. And then once people illegally get here, they're coming to places like New York City, which just says, all right, you're not legal, you're not from this place, just come here, it doesn't matter, we don't give a fuck, just come through, we'll take care of you.
In these shelters allows gang members to easily find and recruit new members who become gang members after they get into
and then what that causes is there was like, I don't know, six months or a year ago, there was literally busloads of people getting sent to New York. And they were just getting dropped off there. Illegal immigrants, they were just getting dropped off there. And no one knows where they came from. I think they figured out who hired the buses. But it was just... They just dropped them there. And ever since, it's been insane.
country, which reveals how bad our vetting has been at the southern border. People enter the country, they're not part of a gang, and then they get here, and now all of a sudden they are. And then they turn around and use the very hotel rooms they're given for free to plan and commit crime all over town. And how do we know this is happening? Well, last summer when there was a robbery spree in Central Park, the people who were on the wanted posters for stealing folks' cell phones with weapons, they were traced back to this very building. Isn't that wild? And the reason the federal government wants to know who's living in these places is so that they can find out who and where the gang members are. And although that's the obvious first step in defeating these gang members and getting them out of our country, progressive leaders in this city are very much against anything like that taking place.
Tom Homan took his
I don't understand why.
Sanctuary city laws to the state capitol. The Republican press conference was apparently too much for Queens Assemblyman Zoran Mamdani, who had to be held back by state police. This video put out by Mamdani's mayoral campaign.
So the guy here screaming at the border czar, he's running for mayor, and believe it or not, he's a contender who has a message that resounds with a lot of New Yorkers who somehow believe that when the president or border czar say they want to get dangerous gang members out of our country, they mean something other than that. Even though we know exactly where the criminals are living and where their base of gang operations is here. We've even got pictures of them, which they take on the street directly in front of this facility, flashing gang signs at the camera. And even though they're allegedly protesting,
I'm sure those are some some nice, respectful young individuals.
Gang members who are human traffickers living in a shelter surrounded by women and children. Who's benefiting from that situation? Especially when trafficking has become such a big problem in this city that now at the bus terminal, where many asylum seekers first arrive, you'll see signs talking about trafficking and how to spot it and how to report it. Why would those signs be there if people weren't being exploited all over this place? But it gets even worse because an investigation by the New York Post revealed that the gang members inside this place got weapons in here through DoorDash delivery bags, which means we don't just have gang members living in here who might be exploiting people. We've got verified gang members living here, some of whom are armed in an area of town where it says no weapons allowed on signs that you'll see on street corners like the one just a couple of blocks away from here in Times Square.
Tom Homan was up in Albany yesterday saying that he will flood the city with ICE agents if Democrats don't do more to crack down on illegal immigration. Immigration advocates are now calling on Adams to step up and defend migrants living in the city.
We really hope that he would reassure New Yorkers and our clients that they will be safe in shelter and that the city will stand up.
I don't understand what these people want. If somebody's a violent, dangerous gang member, why would we want the mayor to come out and tell that person that the city's going to protect them and that they should feel free to roam the town and do what they please, which is what they are doing? Why would we want that? But here's what's really going on. These activists are in a tough spot because the truth of the matter is that they hate President Trump and they're still upset that he's president. Remember, these activists were also the very people telling us in 2023 that the asylum crisis was going to be the best thing to happen to the city. And then we find out that 75% of the arrests near this place are committed by criminals who might be living in this very same facility. On top
75%.
Having a massive population of illegal residents in your city just empowers these very same criminals who are always looking for folks who have to stay off the government's radar, who they can then turn around and threaten and exploit, because these aren't people who are free. These aren't people who can just work at any job they want or live however they want. No, they have to subject themselves to the criminal underworld to live illegally in this city, and that's something none of our leaders want to admit. But sadly, as you're about to see, even though everyone can see
in Chicago, you have gang cards. If you get identified as a gang member, you have to carry a card. Oh, you're talking about from the freaking police? And they search you? And you have a curfew?
Our leaders are either
that's not, I don't think that's constitutional.
By their hatred of the president, or they know this is
that's definitely not constitutional.
Because they don't live in a neighborhood where any of this is taking place. And the disturbing thing about this is that regardless of what these folks believe, their goal is to keep it this way. So there's an entire fleet of what look like police vehicles littering the street in front of this very same hotel where we know gang members are living, which is completely bizarre because it reveals that the police know exactly what's going on in our city, but as a sanctuary city, they're not allowed to cooperate with the federal government one bit, which is why the border czar now says that he's going to have to flood this place with even more ICE agents because he's not getting any cooperation and he's on a mission to make America and the residents of this city safer. But while this is happening, pro-safety laws that some of our elected officials have put forth have absolutely no chance of getting through.
Now, Republicans right now are pushing for two bills. One would repeal the state's green light law, which allows undocumented immigrants to get driver's licenses, and the other bill, which is called Lakin's Law, which would allow for law enforcement officers to notify ICE when they arrest an undocumented.
Right, so it looks like this sanctuary city is going to keep doing two things: issuing driver's licenses to potential gang members and
that's just crazy
from the federal government after our police make an arrest. These are two of the dumbest possible things any place could do from a law and order perspective, that's for sure. Because all
makes no sense. Why would they do this?
And those who the federal government is looking for hide easily in plain sight. For example, if federal authorities conduct some sort of operation and they ask people for identification, they're going to give them New York State issued driver's licenses which they may have illegally obtained with fraudulent information. Look at what you can use to get a license. Illegally obtained with fraudulent information. Look at what you can use to get a license in this city. They'll accept your foreign high school report.
You get a driver's license? With what? A foreign report card?
And they'll even accept a foreign driver's license, which has been expired for 2 years.
Passport?
years. Obviously, this is a massive problem from a public safety perspective, and you'd be stupid if you thought criminals weren't going to find out this is how things operate here and weren't going to come here because of it, which is exactly what they're doing.
Meanwhile, Democrats push back on Homan's visit to the state capitol, holding a press conference vowing to continue to defend immigrants.
But if Mr. Holman wants to be so concerned about public safety and about criminals, he should start with the repeat offender living in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
So according to the political party that runs this city, the only criminal the border czar should be worrying about is the one who lives in the White House, President Trump. Are you kidding me? What about the criminals on wanted posters outside of our asylum shelters? How come nobody's focused on them? The only way to believe this stuff and talk this way is if you live in an alternate reality where you think that every crime that is reported by the police is somehow misinformation if it in any way hampers what's on your agenda. And don't kid yourself, that agenda is not about protecting immigrant communities. No, instead it's about open borders, and the language used to further that agenda is all about separating families and tearing lives apart, and oh, how horrible this is that gang members who live in a hotel like this might not be able to do so anymore.
Matter of fact, I've noticed recently there's news articles saying Tom Homan's suggesting family detention again, family residential centers, and I am. Family residential centers are the opposite of family separation. Why are we even talking about family residential centers? Because this administration, President Trump, wants to make sure these children aren't victims of trafficking. He wants to make sure this family is really a family. This is about saving children, protecting.
Okay, so remember how earlier we talked about trafficking and how it's a massive problem in New York City and how it's something these gangs specialize in? Well, the border czar knows this, and that's why he's operating family detention centers. He wants to figure out if the people who say they're a family really are, or if they're prisoners of some gang and they're being exploited. And the shocking thing about the Roosevelt Hotel is it's a facility specifically
these gangs that are taking children and pretending to be families. It's crazy.
And getting into places like this that do not kick people out.
Well, that's what they
families having
suspect could be happening.
That's a big problem. That gives them a permanent base of operations where they can prey upon the rest of the city. And part of the border czar's job is to figure out if these are real families or fake families. And look, if the government here is putting up signs in the bus terminal telling everyone that trafficking is a big problem here, you know it was a big problem here way before that sign ever showed up.
Border numbers are down 97%. That's the most secure border we ever had because of this president's bold actions, right? He was a game changer. ICE arrests, I looked this morning, they're just below 30,000. More than
don't gangbang. Why you gotta gangbang? It's not that difficult. Just don't do it.
An open border that allows anybody to come into our country and wind up in places like this is only going to empower criminals, which is exactly what's happening. But if you're in the open borders crowd, anything that might shut the border down, even if it's done to defeat gangs and criminals, is something you're not going to be in favor of. Well, what do you think? Is that wrong somehow? Are gang members being taken out of places like this? Is that going to tear families apart? Are these even real families? Or are these gang members a lot smarter than the folks who were letting them into the country without asking any questions? Let me know. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.
Dude, I don't know how we're giving those people driver's license. And they just got here.